Waitress humiliates Jason Statham during a VIP meal. What happens next will shock you. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, then subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The sleek black car pulled up to the curb of La Maison, a tile, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The valet, dressed in a crisp uniform, hurried to open the door, expecting a high-profile guest. But the man who stepped out was dressed casually, black jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a leather jacket. His rugged appearance and unassuming demeanor didn't scream VIP. The valet's enthusiasm faded, and he handed the man a ticket with a polite but disinterested nod. Jason Statham, the Hollywood action star known for his blockbuster films and intense on-screen presence, adjusted his sunglasses and glanced at the restaurant's glowing sign. He wasn't here for the spotlight tonight. After a long week of filming, he craved a quiet meal, away from the flashing cameras and fanfare. He pushed open the heavy glass doors, the soft hum of violins and the clinking of fine china greeting him. Inside, the restaurant was a picture of elegance, crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and tables adorned with fresh roses. The hostess, a young woman named Emily, looked up from her podium. Her eyes scanned Jason from head to toe, lingering on his casual attire. Her smile tightened and she tilted her head slightly, as if questioning his presence in such a luxurious establishment. "Good evening," Jason said, his voice calm but firm. "A table for one, please." "Do you have a reservation, sir?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. No, but I was hoping you could accommodate me," Jason replied, his tone polite but direct. Emily's lips pursed. "I'm afraid we're fully booked tonight," she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a different kind of restaurant." Jason's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. He was used to being underestimated, but tonight, he wasn't in the mood for games. Little did Emily know, her dismissive attitude was about to set off a chain of events that would leave the entire restaurant in shock. Jason stood at the hostess' podium, his calm demeanor unwavering despite Emily's dismissive tone. He glanced around the restaurant, noting the empty tables scattered throughout the dining area. The soft glow of candlelight flickered on pristine tablecloths, and the murmur of conversation filled the air. It was clear the restaurant wasn't fully booked, but Emily's judgmental gaze told him she had already made up her mind. "I can see a few open tables," Jason said, his voice steady but firm. "Won't take much of your time. Just a quick meal." Emily's lips curled into a faint smirk as she leaned slightly over the podium, her tone dripping with condescension. "Those tables are reserved for our VIP guests," she said, emphasizing the last two words as if to remind him of his place. "Yours is a certain standard here, sir. Perhaps you'd prefer somewhere more casual." Jason's eyes narrowed, but he didn't rise to the bait. He had faced far worse than a snooty hostess, and he wasn't about to let her ruin his evening. "Well, I understand," he said, his tone calm but laced with quiet authority. "But I'd still like a table. I'm happy to wait if necessary." Emily sighed dramatically, as if his persistence was an inconvenience. "Fine," she said, grabbing a menu with a flourish. "Follow me." She led him to the farthest corner of the restaurant, where a small, dimly lit table was tucked away from the main dining area. It was clearly the least desirable spot in the room, but Jason didn't complain. He took his seat, his sharp eyes scanning the menu as Emily placed it in front of him with a barely concealed roll of her eyes. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive before she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Jason leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here to make a scene, but he couldn't help feeling a flicker of irritation. He had worked hard to earn his success, and moments like this reminded him that some people would always judge a book by its cover. As he waited, a young waiter approached, his demeanor noticeably warmer than Emily's. "Good evening, sir," he said with a genuine smile. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Jason returned the smile, appreciating the kindness. "Just water for now. Thank you." The waiter nodded and hurried off, leaving Jason alone in his corner. Little did he know, the evening was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would leave Emily and the entire restaurant reeling. Jason stood at the hostess' podium, his calm demeanor unwavering despite Emily's dismissive tone. He glanced around the restaurant, noting the empty tables scattered throughout the dining area. The soft glow of candlelight flickered on pristine tablecloths, and the murmur of conversation filled the air. It was clear the restaurant wasn't fully booked, but Emily's judgmental gaze told him she had already made up her mind. "I can see a few open tables," Jason said, his voice steady but firm. I won't take much of your time. Just a quick meal. Emily's lips curled into a faint smirk as she leaned slightly over the podium, her tone dripping with condescension. Those tables are reserved for our VIP guests, she said, emphasizing the last two words as if to remind him of his place. We have a certain standard here, sir. Perhaps you'd prefer somewhere more casual. Jason's eyes narrowed, but he didn't rise to the bait. He had faced far worse than a snooty hostess, and he wasn't about to let her ruin his evening. You understand, he said, his tone calm but laced with quiet authority. But I'd still like a table. I'm happy to wait if necessary. Emily sighed dramatically, as if his persistence was an inconvenience. Fine, she said, grabbing a menu with a flourish. Follow me. She led him to the farthest corner of the restaurant, where a small, dimly lit table was tucked away from the main dining area. It was clearly the least desirable spot in the room, but Jason didn't complain. He took his seat, his sharp eyes scanning the menu as Emily placed it in front of him with a barely concealed roll of her eyes. Your server will be with you shortly, she said, her tone clipped and dismissive before she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Jason leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here to make a scene, but he couldn't help feeling a flicker of irritation. He had worked hard to earn his success, and moments like this reminded him that some people would always judge a book by its cover. As he waited, a young waiter approached, his demeanor noticeably warmer than Emily's. Good evening, sir, he said with a genuine smile. Can I get you started with something to drink? Jason returned the smile, appreciating the kindness. Just water for now, thank you. The waiter nodded and hurried off, leaving Jason alone in his corner. Little did he know, the evening was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would leave Emily and the entire restaurant reeling. Marcus Reynolds, the owner of La Maison Étoile, stood tall beside Jason's table, his sharp eyes flicking between the empty place setting and Emily, who was now visibly trembling. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade into a tense silence as all eyes turned toward the scene unfolding in the corner. Emily, Marcus said, his voice low but carrying an edge that made everyone within earshot freeze. For why is Mr. Statham's table still empty? And why wasn't I informed that we had such a distinguished guest dining with us tonight? Emily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer panic. She glanced at Jason, who sat calmly in his chair, his expression unreadable, but his presence commanding. I didn't realize. Emily stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't realize? Marcus interrupted, his tone rising slightly. Mr. Statham is one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Are you telling me you didn't recognize him? Or is there another reason he's been treated so poorly? Emily's face turned crimson as she struggled to find an explanation. The other diners had stopped eating, their forks hovering midair as they watched the drama unfold. Even the violin music seemed to pause, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. Jason, sensing the growing tension, finally spoke. It's all right, Marcus, he said, his voice calm but firm. I'm just here for a meal. No need to make a scene. Marcus turned to Jason, his expression softening slightly. Mr. Statham, I'm deeply sorry for the way you've been treated tonight. This is not the standard we uphold at La Maison Étoile. Please, allow me to make this right. Jason nodded, his sharp eyes meeting Marcus's. I appreciate that, but I'd rather this stay between us. No need to embarrass anyone further. Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between respecting Jason's wishes and addressing the blatant disrespect that had occurred. Finally, he turned back to Emily, his voice stern but controlled. Emily, you're relieved of your duties for the evening. Please wait in my office. We'll discuss this later. Emily's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't argue. With a shaky nod, she turned and walked toward the back of the restaurant, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Your meal will be on the house tonight, and I'll personally ensure that your dining experience from this point forward is nothing short of exceptional. Jason gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it. As Marcus walked away to address the kitchen staff, the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted. The earlier tension lingered, and the diners couldn't help but whisper among themselves, their eyes occasionally darting toward Jason's table. Jason, however, remained unfazed. He leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze scanning the room once more. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, but he wasn't one to dwell on drama. He was here for a meal, and he intended to enjoy it. Little did he know, his calm demeanor and gracious response were about to leave a lasting impression on everyone in the restaurant, one that would change the way they saw him, and perhaps even themselves. The kitchen doors swung open, and a team of waiters emerged, their movements precise and hurried. They carried plates of food, their aromas wafting through the air and drawing the attention of every diner in the room. At the center of it all was Jason's meal, a perfectly seared steak, glistening with truffle butter, accompanied by a side of roasted vegetables and a glass of rich red wine. Marcus himself led the procession, placing the plate in front of Jason with a respectful nod. Mr. Statham, your meal. I hope it meets your expectations. Jason leaned forward, the savory scent of the steak filling his senses. He picked up his knife and fork, cutting into the tender meat with ease. The first bite was exquisite, juicy, flavorful, and cooked to perfection. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he nodded in approval. This is excellent, Jason said, his voice carrying just enough for Marcus to hear. Thank you. Marcus smiled, visibly relieved. I'm glad to hear it. Please enjoy your meal. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to let me know. As Marcus walked away, the other diners couldn't help but steal glances at Jason's table. Whispers spread like wildfire, their tones a mix of awe and guilt. That's Jason Statham, one woman murmured to her companion. Well, I can't believe they treated him like that. I know, her companion replied, shaking her head. It's embarrassing. He's handling it so well, though. At another table, a man leaned over to his wife. Did you see how calm he was? I'd have lost my temper if I were in his shoes. The staff, too, seemed to be on edge. The waiters moved with extra care, their eyes occasionally darting toward Jason's table as if to ensure everything was perfect. The earlier incident had served as a wake-up call, and no one wanted to risk another mistake. Jason, however, seemed oblivious to the attention. He focused on his meal, savoring each bite with the same intensity he'd brought to his films. The steak was tender, the vegetables crisp, and the wine complemented the flavors perfectly. For a moment, it felt like the earlier drama had never happened. But as he ate, Jason couldn't help but reflect on the evening. He had faced judgment countless times in his life, whether for his rugged appearance, his accent, or his humble beginnings. Tonight was just another reminder that no matter how successful he became, some people would always see only what they wanted to see. Still, he wasn't one to hold grudges. He had learned long ago that kindness and humility were far more powerful than anger or pride. And as he glanced around the room, he could see the impact of his calm demeanor. The diners were watching him not with pity or curiosity, but with respect. By the time Jason finished his meal, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. The tension had eased, replaced by a sense of quiet admiration. Even the staff seemed to move with a renewed sense of purpose, as if determined to prove they were better than their earlier misstep. As Jason set his napkin on the table and leaned back in his chair, he knew the evening wasn't over. There was still one more thing he needed to do. One final act that would leave a lasting impression on everyone in the room. Jason signaled for the check, his calm demeanor unchanged despite the evening's events. The waiter, a young man named Daniel, approached the table with a nervous smile, holding the bill in a sleek leather folder. Here you go, Mr. Statham, Daniel said, placing the folder on the table. It was an honor to serve you tonight. Jason opened the folder, his sharp eyes scanning the total. Without hesitation, he pulled out a crisp $100 bill and placed it inside the folder. Then, he reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small notebook and pen. He scribbled a few words on a piece of paper, folded it neatly, and placed it inside the folder alongside the money. Thank you, Daniel, Jason said, handing the folder back to the waiter. You've been very kind tonight. This is for you and the rest of the staff, except Emily. Daniel's eyes widened as he opened the folder and saw the generous tip. Mr. Statham, this is too much. Are you sure? Jason nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. You all worked hard tonight, and I appreciate it. Just make sure Emily doesn't get a share. She's got some learning to do. Daniel hesitated, then nodded respectfully. Thank you, sir. I'll make sure it's handled properly. As Daniel walked away, Jason stood up, his presence commanding the attention of the room once more. He adjusted his leather jacket and glanced around the restaurant, his sharp gaze lingering on the other diners. They quickly looked away, pretending to focus on their meals, but the air was thick with curiosity. Jason made his way toward the exit, his steps measured and confident. Just as he reached the door, Marcus appeared, his expression a mix of gratitude and regret. Mr. Statham, Marcus said, extending his hand. Thank you for your understanding tonight. I hope we can make it up to you someday. Jason shook his hand firmly, his grip steady and reassuring. Well, you already have, Marcus. The meal was excellent, and your staff, most of them anyway, were very kind. Just make sure this doesn't happen again. Marcus nodded, his face serious. I will. I promise you that. With a final nod, Jason pushed open the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights sparkled around him, and the hum of traffic filled the streets. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment of quiet after the evening's drama. Back inside the restaurant, Daniel handed the folder to Marcus, who opened it to find the generous tip and the folded note. He read the note silently, his expression softening as he absorbed Jason's words. To the staff of La Maison Itoya, thank you for your hard work and kindness tonight. Remember, everyone deserves respect, no matter how they look or where they come from. Treat your guests well and they'll remember you for it. Jason, Statham, and Marcus looked up, his eyes scanning the room. The diners were still whispering, their conversations now tinged with admiration and reflection. The staff, too, seemed to stand a little taller, their earlier unease replaced by a sense of pride. The evening had been a lesson for everyone, one they wouldn't soon forget. As the door closed behind Jason, the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. The tension that had gripped the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a quiet hum of conversation and reflection. Diners exchanged glances, their earlier whispers now turning into thoughtful discussions. At one table, a woman leaned toward her husband, her voice soft but earnest. Did you see that? He didn't even raise his voice, just handled it with class. Her husband nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, it's a reminder, isn't it? You never know who someone really is just by looking at them. Near the kitchen, the staff huddled together, their voices low but animated. Daniel held up the $100 bill, his eyes wide with disbelief. He left this for us, he said, his voice tinged with awe. And he wrote a note, too. Marcus joined the group, holding the folded piece of paper. He read Jason's words aloud, his voice steady but filled with emotion. The staff listened in silence, their faces a mix of guilt and inspiration. He's right, one of the waiters said finally. We should have treated him better from the start. It's not about who he is, it's about how we treat everyone. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. This is a lesson for all of us. From now on, we treat every guest with the same respect, no matter how they're dressed or what they look like. Understood. The staff murmured their agreement, earlier unease replaced by a sense of purpose. Even Emily, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, seemed to shrink under the weight of her mistake. She approached Marcus hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus, I'm sorry, she said, her eyes downcast. I didn't mean to. Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off. This isn't just about tonight, Emily. It's about how we represent this restaurant and ourselves. Take some time to think about that. Emily nodded, her face flushed with shame. She retreated to the back office, her earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet humility. Meanwhile, the diners began to finish their meals, their conversations now centered on the evening's events. Many of them left generous tips inspired by Jason's gesture. Some even asked to see the note, their curiosity piqued by the Hollywood star's words of wisdom. As the night wore on, the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted. The staff moved with a renewed sense of purpose, their interactions with guests more attentive and genuine. The diners, too, seemed to carry a newfound appreciation for the importance of kindness and respect. Jason's presence had left an indelible mark on La Maison in the Itoya, one that would shape its future and the way its staff and patrons viewed the world. The restaurant was quieter now, the dinner rush having subsided. The remaining diners lingered over their desserts and coffee, their conversations softer, more reflective. The staff moved about their duties with a newfound attentiveness, their earlier missteps replaced by a sense of purpose. In the kitchen, the chefs worked diligently, their focus sharper than ever. The head chef, a burly man named Andre, wiped his hands on his apron and turned to his team. Let's make sure every plate that goes out tonight is perfect, he said, his voice firm but encouraging. We owe it to our guests and to ourselves. At the bar, the mixologist, a young woman named Clara, carefully crafted a cocktail for a guest. She glanced at the note Marcus had left on the counter, its words still fresh in her mind. Treat your guests well, and they'll remember you for it. She smiled to herself, adding an extra flourish to the drink before handing it to the guest with a warm smile. In the dining room, Marcus moved from table to table, checking on the guests personally. His usual professionalism was tinged with a genuine warmth, as if Jason's presence had reminded him of why he had opened the restaurant in the first place. At one table, a couple in their 50s chatted quietly. Phew. The woman, her eyes still sparkling with the evening's excitement, leaned toward her husband. You know, I think I'll remember this night for a long time, she said. Not just because of Jason Statham, but because of the way he handled everything. It's inspiring. Her husband nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's a good reminder, isn't it? To treat everyone with respect no matter who they are. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in the back office, her thoughts swirling. The weight of her actions pressed heavily on her, but for the first time she allowed herself to truly reflect. She thought about the way she had judged Jason, the way she had treated him with such disdain, and she thought about the way he had responded, with calm, with grace, with kindness, grace, with kindness. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. It wasn't just about Jason. It was about the way she had been living her life, judging people based on appearances, assuming she was better than others. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath, resolving to do better. When Marcus finally entered the office, Emily looked up, her face a mixture of guilt and determination. Marcus, I want to apologize, she said, her voice trembling but sincere. I was wrong. I judged him and I treated him terribly. I don't want to be that person anymore. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. Apology accepted, Emily, but actions speak louder than words. Show me, and everyone here, that you've learned from this. Emily nodded, her resolve firm. I promise. As the night drew to a close, the restaurant buzzed with a quiet energy. The staff, the diners, even Marcus, they all carried a piece of the evening's lesson with them. Jason's presence had been fleeting, but his impact was lasting. And as the final guests left, their smiles a little brighter and their hearts a little lighter, it was clear that La Maison Étoile would never be the same. The days following Jason Statham's visit to La Maison Étoile, a touchable shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. The staff moved with a renewed sense of purpose, their interactions with guests more genuine and attentive. The diners, too, seemed to carry a newfound appreciation for the restaurant, their smiles warmer and their compliments more frequent. Marcus had called a staff meeting the morning after the incident. The team gathered in the dining room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Marcus stood at the front, holding Jason's note in his hand. Last night was a wake-up call for all of us. Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. We were reminded of something important, something we should never forget. Every person who walks through those doors deserves respect, no matter who they are or how they look. He held up the note, its words now etched into the hearts of everyone in the room. Jason Statham didn't just leave us a generous tip. He left us a lesson, and it's up to us to carry that lesson forward. The staff nodded, their faces serious but inspired. Emily, standing at the back of the room, felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent the night reflecting on her actions, and now, hearing Marcus's words, she felt a renewed determination to change. Over the next few weeks, the changes at La Maison Étoile became evident. Emily, once dismissive and arrogant, now greeted every guest with a warm smile and a genuine welcome. She took the time to learn their names, their preferences, and their stories. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. One evening, a regular customer approached Marcus at the end of his meal. I don't know what's changed, the man said, his tone appreciative, but this place feels different. It's like everyone here actually cares. Marcus smiled, his chest swelling with pride. Thank you, he said. We're trying to be better, for our guests and for ourselves. The kitchen staff, too, had embraced the lesson. Andre, the head chef, had implemented a new rule. Every dish, no matter how simple, had to be prepared with the same care and attention as their most expensive offering. We are not just cooking food, he told his team. For we're creating experiences, and every guest deserves the best. Even the diners seemed to carry the evening's lesson with them. Stories of Jason's visit spread through the city, shared over coffee and cocktails. People began to see La Maison Étoile not just as a restaurant, but as a place where kindness and respect were served alongside exquisite meals. One night, a young couple arrived at the restaurant, their faces glowing with excitement. We heard about what happened here, the woman said as Emily seated them. We wanted to see it for ourselves. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Oh, welcome, she said. We're so glad to have you. As the couple enjoyed their meal, they couldn't help but notice the warmth and attentiveness of the staff. It was clear that something special had happened here, something that went beyond food and service. By the time they left, the woman turned to Emily with a smile. Thank you, she said. This was more than a meal. It was an experience. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. Thank you for coming. We hope to see you again. As the restaurant closed for the night, Marcus stood in the dining room, his eyes scanning the empty tables. He thought about Jason's visit, about the note that now hung framed in the staff room, and about the changes it had inspired. The evening had been a turning point, not just for the restaurant, but for everyone who had been a part of it. And as Marcus turned off the lights and locked the doors, he knew that La Maison Étoile would never be the same. The story of Jason Statham's visit to La Maison Étoile became a legend shared by diners and staff alike. It was a reminder that kindness and respect are the true measures of character, and that everyone, no matter who they are or how they look, deserves to be treated with dignity. And as the restaurant continued to thrive, its legacy of warmth and hospitality served as a testament to the power of a single act of grace.